now we're going to move on to the third theme, engagement and experience. And we're going to be looking at the Marathon for All that was organized during the Olympic Games. Some of you may have been lucky enough to take part. If you didn't, you missed something really special. We're going to be talking with the companies who worked on this, who are prize. So before that, if you could welcome Romain Lachance, in charge of engagement for Paris 2024. Hello, Romain, Director of Engagement for Paris 2024. Still or ex? What's the date? For the past 3-4 days, I am no longer in charge of engagement for Paris 2024. So thank you for coming to talk to us about this particularly innovative, engaging event, the Marathon for All. Following in the footsteps of the Olympic athletes, same day, same route. What was the challenge for you at the organizing committee for this? First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. Thank you, Lucien. I'm delighted to be here. For us, the key really was to open up the games and to see how we could do that. So we decided to open up the opening ceremony, as you saw, and then also to open up the games to other territories. And then we said we absolutely need to open up the games and to have the population take part. And the best way was to take an Olympic discipline and to have people actually doing it for themselves. So we looked into the marathon and we thought things through, and we said to ourselves that we could develop this for other sports. I proposed pretty much all of the different sports. We could have had a mass tennis event, but it was always going to be complicated to event in terms of logistics. So the idea was to organize this grand premiere with the Marathon for All, a 10-kilometer route. I don't know if some of you here actually took part. And so with 10 kilometers and the 42-kilometer format. The idea was to get people to participate, to take part, French people to take part, to boost the acceptance of the project, to really touch people with this event that only happens once every 100 years in this country, and to fit in with the vision of Paris 2024, which is to change the position of sport structurally in the life of French people, and to get French people to take part in more sport. And so the selection of the 40,000 people who took part took several years, with the help of our service providers, Sport Heroes in particular. We managed to get everything moving to select the right profiles, and they were not just fans of running. So that's the framework. You revolutionized the experience for the spectators who actually played an active part, and you went even further, because in addition to these marathon runners in the streets of Paris, you also had runners in 186 countries through the connected Marathon for All year, because there were 40,000 lucky people who could take part in the Marathon for All in Paris. And we realized that 5 years ago, for example, on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, there was a 5-kilometer run to get a place in the race. It was called Catch Me If You Can, so people were registered according to the pace of their running, and if they finished the lap before Kipchoge, the greatest marathon runner of all times, so we got the calculations wrong, comparing the paces, and we realized that in fact we had a number of fans which was way too high, that we couldn't afford to get things wrong. And so we adjusted things, but from the very first time we realized that really there was a huge amount of interest in the Marathon for All. And it was not just for the 42-kilometer race, but also the more accessible 10-kilometer race. So then we organized challenges. We organized more than 100 challenges working with sport heroes in different places where people could run qualifying races to take part. And to come back to your question now, there were only 40,000 places in the race, and we'd had 400,000 applicants. So what could we do? So we thought at the same time, on the same day, we're going to organize a big race, the Connected Marathon for All, where people can run on a machine or in the street or in support of a member of their family who is taking part in the race to take part in the adventure. 473,153 people finished the Marathon for All. And as you said, you mentioned sport heroes. You managed to involve different stakeholders, public and also private companies, which are also winners in this year's awards overall. If we take a step back in time, and if I could also take this opportunity to say that we're talking here about the games which were such a success. We need to say that the games were a success. We knew they would be beforehand, but some people didn't believe us. But one of the big successes was this. But it's not just thanks to the employees of Paris 2024, but it was really a collective effort. And I believe very strongly and sincerely that there were all these service providers who worked in one way or another for the Games. It's a whole galaxy, a whole universe of people who contributed. And it all went far beyond our expectations, which contributed to the success for all of us. And once again, on my behalf and on behalf of Tony and Paris 2024, thank you to everybody who contributed to this success. And similarly, on the same subject, for the Connected Marathon for All, there was ASO managing the organization side, Kinomap, Orange as well, who were our partners. Who have I forgotten? Fitness Park as well. Fitness Park also for the Connected Marathon. So really a collective adventure, something we couldn't have done on our own. So these different award winners are going to join us now. Philippe Motti for Kinomap, Paul-Émile Sab for Sport Heroes, and Thomas Mendonça for Fitness Park.
Allez messieurs, prenez place. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous. Et je vais donner la parole à Paul-Émile tout d'abord.
We'll begin with Paul-Émile. Thank you for being with us. You were involved in Paris 2024 from very early on. When was it that you got involved in this for the Marathon for All? Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. For me, it goes back to 2017, at the time of the application. The first time we worked, it was with the teams working on the candidacy of Paris, who wanted to use our Connected Challenge format to involve as many French people as possible in the bid to be the host city and to get French people to take part in a sporting challenge in support of the bid. Many French people got involved, ran millions of kilometers, and that was part of the arguments in the bid for Paris 2024. That's when we started working on this. Then you were chosen as a service provider after a call for tender, and then could begin to start preparing people for the event. So all these different stakeholders are here, but with different statuses, I think, if we can say it that way. Sport Heroes was a subcontractor. They sold their services. Fitness Park were partners. Key Nomap had a license from the CIO, and that does necessarily change the roles and remits of each of them. So Paul, Emile. On the platform, before the marathon and during the marathon, what was there on the platform? If I can just say that as a subcontractor, until now we hadn't actually been mentioned. It's very strange here to hear Romain referring to Sport Heroes. Until now he couldn't mention our name, and really it's a great opportunity to promote companies like ours which were behind the scenes because of this status. So the Marathon for All, there were 2.5 years of the qualifications to take part in the marathon. There were challenges which were organized almost weekly with differing formats, inclusive challenges, sometimes 10 kilometers, sometimes 5, sometimes 42 kilometers, but over 2 weeks, so that everybody could take part, whatever their level in running. And in addition to this challenge, and in terms of content, the Marathon for All was an opportunity to talk about the Olympic and Paralympic Games, to raise awareness about how to prepare for a marathon. And that was the main idea. So emulation, gamification, and these regular qualifications at intervals, who also encouraged other people to take part. At the end of 2020, by the end of 2023, all of the places had gone. And that also made it possible to create a community around the future participants. That's true. At the end of 2023, there were several tens of thousands of people who were happy and who could take part, and then some hundreds of thousands of people who couldn't. But all those who had got themselves a place could continue to receive support, to be prepared for the race with training programs. And so they could be part of the community and receive support to prepare for the big day. Thomas Mendonça, you're the Managing Director of Fitness Park, a partner, but you didn't take part in the bid. You thought the game wasn't for you. You thought it was way beyond your reach to be a sponsor. What changed your mind? Right at the beginning, the idea of being partner of the game seemed beyond our reach. It's such a big project. Then we thought to ourselves, we're the leaders in gyms in Europe, and it was this project of the Marathon for All, the connected Marathon for All, that pushed us to look into the subject. And therefore we accepted to be in the partnership with the project, and we joined as a sponsor of the Olympic Games. And so it began as a project, became a general partnership for us at the time of the marathon itself. When the Marathon for All was on, what did you do? We opened all our Fitness Park gyms for the whole weekend. Everybody could come to Fitness Park. We have 1.2 million members around Europe, and all the French sites were open. Everybody could take part. The machines were there with the KinoMap technology and with our tracking systems for an immersive experience, so everybody could take part in the connected marathon over the 2 days, and it was a genuine event which attracted more than 100,000 participants. So I think Fitness Park played its part in the success of the event. We're now perhaps going to take a moment to look at a short video with some testimonials from some of the people who took part in the connected Marathon for All on the machines of Fitness Park. So people would register to get their number, select KinoMap and the route they wanted to run. They needed to do 30 minutes minimum of activity in preparation. to take part, sorry, and then received a certificate and could try to win a prize. So there were different steps in the process to take part in this, with the diplomas which were handed out at the end for those which had covered the distance of the marathon. We saw some pictures of the machines there on the screens. Philippe Moiti for Kino Mapu also took part in organizing this key moment. If we could talk about this status you had, which meant that you could communicate about the event. Yeah. So this is a bit of a surprising story. We came in a bit after our friend from Sport Heroes. We didn't want to be a subcontractor because that means you're there as a white label and you can't appear. So we didn't have the budget that Fitness Park had to be a partner, but we did want to be visible. And then we wanted the Marathon for All really to be for everybody, everywhere, and to open up internationally. Paris 2024 could only grant rights in France, and so that was handed over to the CIO, who held the international rights. So we needed to find a legal solution as part of the official programs of the CIO, compatible with what Paris 2024 wanted to do and with our budget. So we became an official licensee of the CIO, which gave us rights in France and internationally. So you started in this at the beginning of 2022. We were there at the time of the bid. Then I let it go because I thought it would take too long to know who was doing what. It was almost a full-time job to keep up with what was going on. So we let things drop. But when this open marathon came up, we thought this was our opportunity to make our contribution to the edifice and really to make the event accessible to everybody, everywhere. And for the Marathon for All, for it really to be for everyone, we were asking for just 30 minutes of activity to run all or part of the route, but it was much more open than for the actual runners. So with all the things you have developed, has that enabled you perhaps to progress a bit more quickly and to develop a competitive edge? Our role is to support race organizers, to try to reach a broader audience than they would usually reach. You could have a marathon over a month. It's perhaps not the same. To see how we can recruit people, for people who might think that the marathon isn't really for them, who would prefer to do it in several portions, and also to reach the community of participants. Because if in your family you have someone doing Ironman trials or who runs marathons or triathlons, your family and friends can also take part to some extent in the adventure. It takes a lot of time, and perhaps you can involve your friends or your spouse or your family or your colleagues from the office to be part of the adventure with you, obviously not with the same level of performance. So we're trying to see how we can make the races accessible to everybody in a different format. Romain, do we know whether the Marathon for All did reach people who had never done anything like this before and who weren't really doing sports? I don't know the overall figures for the marathons. We had 1/3 of participants who were running a marathon for the first time. I don't know if that's a normal figure. More than 30% of the participants were running their first marathon. And what we realized also is there were 50% of women, 50% men. And then we also realized that there were a lot of people, a lot of fans who would run a lot of races each year and who wanted to take part, but there were other profiles which also interested us, because everything we're saying here obviously echoes what we wanted to do in the first place, which was to change the place of sport in our country, to contribute to the national cause of getting people to do at least 30 minutes of sports or physical activity each day, which is why we made this choice of 30 minutes. to take part in the marathon, the connected marathon for all. So there weren't just semi-professional runners. We had people who were doing some sport again because they wanted to take part in this race of a lifetime. There were people taking part because there was a member of their family taking part to accompany them. There were others taking part for a cause, which means there were lots of very special stories here, and our role with Sport Heroes was to try to showcase all of this. How has this changed things for Sport Heroes taking part in this major project? Now that we can, obviously we couldn't communicate, but if simply working each day with Romain's team, with small teams in a startup, it's a challenge. It makes us grow, think about the content we're producing, how to develop our app and our technology. The core activity of Sport Heroes is an app for companies called United Heroes, a corporate program to boost employee engagement through sports activities and activities to get people moving. And for the many years where we couldn't say we were the service provider of the organizing committee, what we could do was go to see all the partners. Some are here, EDF, Loxam, companies like that who were partners and were seeking to activate the partnership internally and to try to get their staff involved in a sports activity, which meant that we could develop United Heroes in these partner companies. We worked with 23 partners of the Olympic Games. Just to come back to what you said, there are two really innovative. We really wanted innovative solutions with French startups. That was what was really important for us, as we've seen since this morning when we were talking about the opening ceremony and showcasing the talent we have in our company. We have some excellent examples here for upcoming events that you will be working on every day, every week. There are tens of thousands of employees in companies we work with. But at the end of November, the second half of November, we're organizing an inter-company competition, the H Games. It's an inter-company competition organized around integration and disability at the same time as the European Week for the Employment of Disabled People. And in this operation there'll be large numbers of companies taking part, and there'll be a physical event at Charletti Stadium to mark the end of the event. And I think there has been an effect in terms of engagement. The first edition of the H Games was in 2021 after the Tokyo Olympic Games. And the idea was that we talk a lot about para sports during the Olympics, and we have to try to see if we can talk about it longer term with the companies, showcasing the extraordinary things that these disabled athletes do. And so, thanks to the huge success of the Olympic and the Paralympic Games in Paris, I think this edition of the H Games will be the biggest we have ever organized, with hundreds of thousands of euros of donations for the handisport in France. And has the event this summer boosted your activity? As we have very seasonal activities, the real challenge for Paris 2024 starts now. How we can convert that higher profile into greater use of the platform, because the Marathon for All of the 10th of August was in what is our off period, and so the challenge really starts now. But in terms of our B2B renown and the partners, the brands, the manufacturers we're working with, it really has had an impact. Some foreign activity or just French at Kinomap? We only do 15% of our turnover in France. For the rest, we're focused on other countries, which is also why we found a solution to have international rights to promote the event. So that was complicated for subcontractors. It was also complicated for people like us who had licenses. That was a subject we could talk about for a long time. It was difficult to activate it, but we did succeed, and we do have this international activity. We're going to be creating a race called Run for the Troops in the US, which is inspired by Paris 2024, but on a smaller scale. So in addition to this wonderful experience, what will the partnership have brought you? I would say my feeling is very similar. There is a marketing, positioning effect in terms of credibility. Working with this sort of event on this sort of scale isn't something we all get a chance to do. It does really establish the brand. I think also for our gyms, the quality of our community, the quality of our communication plays a role in developing loyalty of our members and clients. So I think all of this is very positive. Same thing for the B2B side for us, for the investors. We have a network of franchisees. It gives the brand greater credibility, so that's positive. And we've also seen impacts at the start of the school year in September. There were more enrollments in our gyms, and for sport activities generally, September was a very good month this year. So all this enthusiasm, improving the experience, promoting the brand, all of this is having an impact on our business. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue in events. A few years ago, we launched a fitness event called Fitness Park Heroes, which we're going to step up, to accelerate, to grow, because we're convinced that this activity is also a part of our profession. Our role is not just to provide equipment inside the four walls of a gym, but to create ties for people. And I think this shows us the way to go even further. So it was a great first experience. It's wonderful to start like that. Romain Lachamp, with the CIO, what was their reaction after the Marathon for All and the Connected Marathon for All? Did they react? Was it easy to get their acceptance? Was it complicated? There are subjects which were complicated, but this is a subject they had been thinking about for some time, of opening up an event, and it went quite well. On the day itself, for those who were there, it was magical what happened there. It really was mad. And to come back to what you were saying, they now have the same challenge of how they manage this afterwards. We have a database of more than 5 million members. Part of that has gone to the organizing committee. What are they going to do with that? To keep French people doing sport, keep them moving. And 35% of the people in the database are foreign as well. So what can be done with that? What's Los Angeles going to do? For the moment, we don't. Have they shown interest? They would seem to be interested. We've had a lot of meetings. But having said that, I don't know what will happen. It would seem strange not to continue, and perhaps not even to open this up to more events. What can we do with this community? How can we coordinate this community over the next 4 years? What can we tell them? How can we keep that thread going within this community, to whom we have sent a lot of messages? So I think that is the challenge. So it all begins now. If they want, they can all come to Fitness Park to train on KinoMap equipment and with Sport Heroes. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you, Romain, for coming to talk about the Marathon for All and the Connected Marathon for All. Thank you very much.